My father slid a single piece of paper across the kitchen table. The same kitchen table where I'd eaten 10,000 meals as a kid, and asked me to sign it. It was a quitclaim deed. He wanted me to sign over the 4-bedroom house I'd bought them in 2019 to my sister, Vanessa. The same sister who'd received my entire college fund $27,000 in 1997, while I got a handshake and a speech about how I was the strong one. My mother sat in the corner, clutching a wadded-up tissue, not making eye contact. My father tapped the line where my signature was supposed to go and said, "It's the right thing to do, Marcus. You know how Vanessa is." I looked at that document for a long time. The kitchen smelled like the same burnt coffee my mother had been making for 30 years. Maxwell House, always slightly too strong, always in the same chipped blue mug. Outside, the October wind was pulling the last brown leaves off the sugar maple I'd climbed as a boy. I set the pen down. I folded my hands. And I said, "No. But to understand how we got here, you have to go back to 1997 to a split-level house on Pembroke Lane in Covington, Kentucky, and a family that looked perfectly normal from the outside. My father, Gerald, worked 31 years at a printing plant off Madison Avenue. My mother, Diane, did bookkeeping part-time for a dentist's office on Scott Street. They weren't wealthy people, but they were careful. They saved. My father drove the same Buick LeSabre for 14 years because he said the money was going somewhere more important. The college fund. There were 2 of us. Me, the older by 4 years, and Vanessa. From the time I can remember, the rules were different for each of us. I mowed the lawn starting at 12. I got my first job bagging groceries at Kroger when I was 15. When my grades dipped to a B- in sophomore chemistry, my father sat me down for 45 minutes and told me that nobody in this world was going to hand me anything. Vanessa got a car for her 16th birthday. A used Honda Civic, nothing fancy but still, a car. When I turned 16, I got a bus pass and my father's favorite line. "You're the strong one, Marcus. You don't need the help." I believed him. That's the part that still gets me. I actually believed that being denied things was a form of compliment. When I was 17, I got accepted to the University of Cincinnati with a partial academic scholarship. The rest, about $27,000 over 4 years, was supposed to come from the college fund. My parents had told me since I was 9 years old that the money was there. I planned my life around it. I chose my school around it. Then 3 weeks before my first semester, my mother sat me down at that same kitchen table and told me the money was gone. All of it. They'd given it to Vanessa. Vanessa had gotten into trouble. She was 21. Wait, no, she was 17 at the time. I was 21 when the consequences really hit. But she was 13 when the favoritism started and 17 when the fund was drained. Let me be precise because the details matter. I was 17. Vanessa was 13. But my parents had already committed the funds to a private arts academy in Lexington that Vanessa wanted to attend. It cost $11,000 a year. They'd paid the first year already and committed to the second. My mother cried when she told me. My father didn't even come into the room. I could hear him in the garage, running the table saw, building a bookshelf for Vanessa's new dorm room. I asked my mother one question. "Did you even consider telling me first?" She wiped her eyes and said, "You're the strong one, Marcus. You'll figure it out." There it was again. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I went upstairs, sat on my bed, and stared at the acceptance letter pinned to my corkboard for a very long time. Then I made a decision. I walked down to the Army recruiting office on Pike Street the next morning. I was 17, so I needed a parent's signature. My father signed it without hesitation. I don't think he even read the paperwork. He just said, "That's probably for the best." I shipped out to Fort Benning 8 weeks later. I served 11 years, including 2 deployments. I earned my degree through night classes and military tuition assistance. A bachelor's in business administration from the University of Maryland Global Campus. Every credit paid for with my own time, my own discipline, my own sacrifice. Nobody handed me anything. Vanessa lasted 2 semesters at the Arts Academy. She dropped out, moved back home, and cycled through a series of jobs and relationships over the next decade. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because $27,000, my $27,000, bought exactly 8 months of something she didn't even finish. During my years in the Army, I saved aggressively. I invested carefully. I lived in base housing, drove used trucks, and put money into index funds every single month like clockwork. By the time I was 28, I had more saved than most people twice my age. By 30, I'd bought my first rental property, a duplex in Erlanger, Kentucky for $112,000. By 35, I owned 3. In 2019, my parents' situation had deteriorated. My father had retired with a modest pension. My mother's health was declining, early-stage rheumatoid arthritis, mounting prescription costs. Their house on Pembroke Lane needed a new roof, new plumbing, and the foundation was cracking. They couldn't afford the repairs and couldn't sell the house in that condition. So I bought them a house. Not a mansion. A clean, solid 3-bedroom ranch on Willowbrook Drive in Florence, Kentucky. I paid $168,000 for it in cash. I put the deed in my name. My accountant, Phil Renner, advised it for tax and liability purposes, but I told my parents it was theirs. I told them to live there as long as they needed. I paid the property taxes. I covered the insurance. I even had a contractor install grab bars in the bathroom when my mother's mobility started getting worse. I did this because they were my parents, because despite everything I loved them, and because I had the means to help, and I believe that when you can help, you should. Vanessa never thanked me. She never acknowledged it. The one time it came up at Thanksgiving dinner in 2020, she said, "Well, it's not like it cost you anything. You don't even have kids." I set my fork down. I took a breath. I said, "Pass the green beans, please." My wife, Lorraine, squeezed my knee under the table. She didn't say anything at dinner. He didn't have to. Later that night, in our kitchen back home, she poured 2 glasses of sweet tea and sat across from me. Lorraine is a pediatric nurse. She's seen every kind of family dysfunction you can imagine. She looked at me and said something I've never forgotten. "Marcus, you can't fill a cup that someone keeps turning upside down. At some point, you have to accept that the pouring isn't the problem." I thought about that for a long time. For the next few years, things were quiet. My parents lived in the Willowbrook house. I visited monthly, brought groceries, fixed small things around the property. Vanessa visited rarely, usually when she needed something. In 2022, she went through a divorce. In 2023, she lost her apartment. And in October of this year, she moved into my parents' house. That's when the phone call came. My father called me on a Tuesday evening, October 8th. I remember because Lorraine was making chili, and the kitchen smelled like cumin and onions, and the Reds post-game show was on the radio. My father's voice was stiff, rehearsed. He said Vanessa needed stability. He said she was going through a hard time. He said the right thing to do, the Christian thing, was to put the house in her name so she'd have security. I asked him to repeat that. He did. Word for word. Like he'd practiced it. I said, "Dad, I bought that house. With money I earned. I put it in my name for a reason." He said, "You're the strong one, Marcus. You don't need a house. You've got plenty." There it was. The third time. The same words weaponized across 27 years. The phrase that always meant the same thing. Your needs don't count because you'll survive without them. I told him I'd think about it. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time, watching the steam rise from the chili pot, listening to the radio break down a game that didn't matter. 2 weeks later, I drove to the Willowbrook house. That's when my father put the quitclaim deed in front of me. Vanessa was in the living room watching television. She didn't even come to the table. My mother sat in the corner with her tissue. I said no. My father blinked. He wasn't used to hearing that word from me. "Marcus, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I said. "This house is in my name. I pay the taxes on it. I maintain it. I bought it so you and Mom would have a safe place to live. That hasn't changed. You're welcome to stay here for the rest of your lives. But I'm not signing it over to Vanessa." My father's jaw tightened. "She's your sister." "She is. And I love her. But love and a deed are 2 different things." He pushed the paper closer. "If you don't sign this, she's got nothing." "She's got a roof over her head right now," I said. "In a house I paid for. That's not nothing." From the living room, Vanessa called out without looking away from the TV. "Just sign it, Marcus. Stop making everything about you." I stood up. I put my jacket on. I kissed my mother on the forehead. And I left. The calls started 3 days later. The first one was from Vanessa. He was angry, dismissive. He said I was being selfish. She said I had more than enough and was hoarding property out of spite. She said if I really loved the family, I'd do this without being asked twice. I listened. I said, "I understand you're frustrated. But my answer is the same. She hung up. The second call came a week later. My father. His tone had shifted, less commanding, more confused. He said Vanessa had talked to a friend who was a paralegal, and they'd told her she might have rights to the property since she'd been living there. I told him calmly that she had no legal claim whatsoever. The deed was clear. I suggested he consult an actual attorney if he had questions. He got quiet and said, "I didn't think it'd go this far." The third call was from my mother. He was crying. She said Vanessa was threatening to leave and never speak to any of them again if she didn't get the house. She said the family was falling apart. She asked me, "Can't you just do this one thing for us?" I said, "Mom, I've done many things for you. I bought you a home. I've never asked for anything in return. But I won't reward a pattern that started when I was 17 years old." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I know we weren't fair to you." That was the first time either of my parents had ever said those words. The fourth call came on a Saturday morning in November. It was Vanessa. Her voice was different. Smaller, thinner, stripped of the armor she usually wore. She said she'd talked to a real estate attorney, and he'd confirmed she had no claim to the house. She said she was embarrassed. She said she didn't know what to do. I said, "You can stay in the house, Vanessa." That was always the offer. "But it stays in my name and we're going to set some ground rules." She didn't argue. I called Phil Renner that afternoon. He drew up a simple occupancy agreement. Vanessa could live in the house rent-free for 12 months while she got back on her feet, contingent on maintaining the property and seeking stable employment. My parents would remain there as long as they wished. The deed stayed in my name. Everything was documented, everything was clean. Phil looked at me over his reading glasses when I signed the agreement and said, "You know, most people in your position would have sold the house out from under them." "I know," I said. "But that's not who I am." Lorraine and I drove down to Florence that evening. The air was cold and sharp, and the sky was that deep November gray that makes the whole world feel still. We brought a rotisserie chicken from Costco and a bag of dinner rolls. We ate at the kitchen table, all 5 of us, for the first time in years. Nobody apologized dramatically. Nobody made a speech. My father said, "This chicken's good." My mother patted my hand. Vanessa asked Lorraine about her work, and Lorraine told a story about a 4-year-old who'd tried to give his teddy bear a flu shot. Vanessa laughed. It was a real laugh, not a performance. It wasn't a Hallmark movie. The scars didn't vanish over dinner rolls. But it was a start. That was 5 months ago. Vanessa got a job as an administrative assistant at a veterinary clinic in Burlington. She's been paying a small amount toward utilities voluntarily, which I didn't ask for but which I accepted because I think it matters to her dignity. My parents are comfortable. My mother's new medication is helping with the arthritis. My father called me last week to ask my advice about replacing the gutters. He didn't tell me I was the strong one. He just said, "I trust your judgment on this." It was a small sentence, but after 27 years it felt like an ocean. If this story feels familiar to you, if you've been the one your family leans on but never lifts up, the one who's expected to give without complaint and forgive without apology, I want you to hear something. Boundaries are not selfishness. Saying no is not cruelty. And you are allowed to love your family without handing them the deed to your dignity. You don't have to burn bridges to protect yourself. Sometimes all you have to do is stop crossing them for people who never meet you halfway. If this story spoke to you, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one. Quiet stories about ordinary people who chose to stand their ground. Thank you for listening. I mean that.